Hey, how's everybody doing today? Like Chrissy said, we really appreciate everybody coming. We've had a full day of a lot of learning, and everyone put a lot of effort in to what happened today, so appreciate it. Obviously, I'm Devin McCourty. We're here, we're part of an organization, the Players Coalition. It's a 501c3 and 501c4. It's a bunch of pro athletes that form to try to make a difference in our communities on a national level and local level. Our focus of areas have been education and economic advancement, criminal justice reform, and police and community relations. The coalition is guided by 12 players. We have some former players, some current players. I'm a part of those 12 board members on the Players Coalition, and we're trying to elevate the voices that people don't always listen to. On March 22nd, the three of us plus Matt Slater lobbied and testified right here, advocating for the Promise Act to try to help have equal opportunity for education across the state of Massachusetts. We were encouraged by the dialogue and how the community came out to stress the importance of funding for the future of our children. We were blown away coming here and seeing so many people testify. They showed us a long sheet of how many people testified, from teachers, parents, just community citizens that just want to get involved. So we were blown away by that and happy to be back here today. Today we invited state legislative members of the Joint Committee for Education, Lynn's Mayor Thomas McGee, members of the Lynn School District and Lynn elected officials to tour Tracy Elementary School. I'd like to personally thank Superintendent Patrick Tutwiler, Deputy Superintendent Kim Powers, Mayor Thomas McGee, Robin Ennis, and the Mayor's Deputy Chief of Staff and Principal Griffin for their overwhelming support to host us today. They showed us around Tracy School. We saw classrooms, we saw the gymnasium / cafeteria. We really saw the ins and outs of the schools today. Tracy Elementary School is a representative of the type of school that the State Foundation Budget Review Commission report deemed necessary to provide additional educational funds to meet the needs of the students of the Commonwealth. Before we came today, we found it very interesting. The website of the Massachusetts Board of Education states, the mission of the Massachusetts Board of Elementary and Secondary Education is to strengthen the Commonwealth's public education system so that every student is prepared to succeed in post-secondary education, compete in global economy, and understanding the rights and responsibilities of American citizens, and in doing so, to close all proficiency gaps. So we feel like it's the Commonwealth's constitutional responsibility to support some of the state's lowest performing schools. The FBRC took 5 years to complete, and we're kind of still here trying to figure out what to get done. I think the best part of this is we realize that there are some current inequalities and everyone wants to try to do the right thing and try to help, but we feel like now it's time to help. We've been involved ever since last summer, and last summer legislators failed to reach a resolution to help the bill get passed and supported. So we feel like we're here today and we're going to continue to come around to try to make sure something gets done. Some of these kids have now graduated school without getting the help that's needed. So our goal is to try to make sure no more kids graduate school and leave without getting the proper funding. This time the bill must pass. We need to fully support all these low-income students, and as member of the Players Coalition, we created our nonprofit to use our platform to impact racial and social inequality. We are advocating for the Promise Act because it addresses all of the 5 recommendations to help most of these struggling schools, all of which are economic disadvantage, with most serving high proportion of Black and brown students. Obviously, we're not experts. You guys mostly see us doing something else for a living, but we've been able to really sit down with some students, some teachers, some parents, some other experts who do this for a living and get to learn the true system and what goes on in the day-to-day. But we are husbands and fathers. We have young children who will be in the school system and who are some already in the school system. And we just want every student, and I repeat that, every student to have an equal right to have a good education. So without further ado, I'll pass it on to these guys who I'll have some remarks. Good afternoon. his lookalike, Jason McCourty, and like he said, we went out to Tracy Elementary School today in Lynn, and it was just amazing to see some of the elements that that went on in the school. I mean, the school was built in 1898. That's not a typo. It was really built in 1898, and the school has some of the first electrical lighting in the city, and old gas fixtures can still be seen in the hallways. Some of their classrooms are down in the basement where you can see pipes and different things going on. Today it remains a neighborhood school some 120 years later, but it has been struggling both in space and in resources to meet the multifaceted changing needs of the school district increased by the population. Just to give you a little bit of stats, as of 2018, 70% of Tracy students are Hispanic, with the rest of the population being comprised of African American, Asian, and white students. In 2009, the school had 274 students. Only a decade later, the school is doubling in size, approximately to 529 students, with 58% of those students learning English for the first time. You can imagine the struggle that is with lack of space, lack of resources, lack of teachers trying to teach students who are also trying to learn the language, but at the same time trying to learn math, trying to learn science. What do you do when your school doubles in size but the building does not? In 2014, they started sending kindergarten students across town by bus so they can merge with two other schools each morning and afternoon. It still wasn't enough. In 2016, they added 2 portable classrooms. And before I go on, going into it, I kind of said to Deb when we were looking over the information, what the hell is a portable classroom? And really had no idea what it was, and going to the school today was able to see one portable classroom, 40 years old, one just being built. And it's amazing. You see the 5th grade classes are in both of those portable classrooms, and throughout the day, just to get them used to being in middle school, they switch classes. And I'm pretty sure myself and a lot of you guys, when you got to middle school and you switch classes, you walked from one class in the hallway to the next class. These students today, was I guess a nice day by Massachusetts standards. I've been in Nashville for a while, so it's still pretty cold, but they're forced to switch classes, snow, rain, whatever the conditions are. And now the school has 33% of classrooms with a class size of 26 or higher. Imagine this being your new normal when more than half the kids don't speak English as their first language, and teachers are doing the absolute best job they can without the resources they need. When we walked around, we got high fives, smiles, and warm welcomes. We saw students who were engaged in lessons, and some of those lessons were being delivered in overcrowded classrooms and improvised classrooms within the hallway. We saw once large adequate schoolyard being reduced significantly to accommodate these portable classrooms. Also faculty parking lots, a fence to ward off students from falling bricks from the school to make sure when they're outside they're not getting hit or in any trouble for safety reasons. But I would say what I walked away with the most, obviously beyond the space problems, the resource problems, the lack of social work or guidance counselors, was the overall energy of the staff members there, the teachers, the principal, anybody that had any connection to the Lynn public schools. Not one of them were there to say, oh, without you guys we won't be able to move forward or anything of that. It was just, hey, look, we have some issues, but look what we're doing with them. We don't have enough space, so we're creating tables within our hallways with maybe 4 or 5 seats where teachers may have to come outside the classroom and focus on 4 or 5 students. We don't have enough to have a school library, so what we did was we put tables and we put bookshelves in our hallways where we have enough room, and that became our library until they became a fire code. Now we have no library. Our gymnasium is also our lunchroom, which is also our auditorium, but in the back of this gymnasium, and when I say gymnasium, there's no basketball court, there's no hardwood floor. It's not what you would imagine a gymnasium when you go watch a high school basketball game, and then you go into the back what used to be a stage, and now it's closed off with a wall, and now it's become a hallway of teachers' desks. Then on the sides of it is small little areas for kids to learn, which if you walked into it, you would assume that it was a walk-in closet for a big house. So just seeing those things, sometimes you grow up and you think you didn't have a lot, and it was amazing to see that the students were just all so engaged. They had so much pride in their school and everybody around them. So it was definitely something that was special to see. And for that, I commend the Lynn School Superintendent, the principal, and the staff just for working so hard and just doing their part. You know, it's amazing to see them do so much with so little. And I guess my challenge for us is if we could give them a lot more, it would be amazing to see what they could do with it and what they can bring out of that. I know the legislators who joined us today saw the same things that we did, and we appreciate each of them for taking their time out of their busy schedule to come tour the school with us. I can only hope that others on the Legislative Joint Committee for Education and Senior Leadership will visit these schools of this nature. And at the end of the day, like Deb said, like Deron will say, we all have a common goal, and we've realized there's a problem, so hopefully we can come to an agreement on how to fix that.
Good afternoon, I'm Deron Harmon. Today at Tracy Elementary School in Lynn, we heard from teachers, parents, expressing their concern about the struggles that children are facing that hurt their learning development. As Jason had just said, half of the kids at Tracy enrolled are second language learners. Imagine being a kid just entering the school, which is tough as it is, and you need to learn a new language. An example of this occurred a few years ago when 55% of the incoming English learning first graders were unable to sound out the basic words at the beginning of the school year. Many students have completely forgot any English skills over the summer vacation. Due to the lack of funds, there are no summer enrichment programs available for this population. And some of these children are left behind because they aren't being given the proper resources at home due to their economic conditions, of which some are barely trying to survive. Principal Griffin, just this week, received a new second grader from Guatemala who speaks only Spanish and who has never been to school. And just a fact that was kind of mind-boggling to me was that the teachers who are appointed to teach English to these students who basically barely know how to speak English, it's one teacher for 50 students in the school district. How can the students truly get what they need when one teacher has to teach 50 students? It's just not possible. So you see how a school like this can fall behind with the curriculum because they're already fighting and struggling to learn the language, but then trying to stay afloat to do right by learning and exceeding in the education. The student had to learn English and be promoted to the third grade, where within 1 year, the student will be then expected to take the NCAS exam. How can you take the state test when you barely, know how to speak the language, not at a fluent level to read the test to yourself? And I know one of the teachers was telling me today that it's times where the teachers are given the responsibility to read the test to the students so that they can comprehend and do their best on the test. If the student doesn't perform well on the exam, the scores are reflected against the school and the district. Students don't get to choose their psychoeconomic environment. There are children who come to school in the same clothes without having any breakfast, possibly only one parent at home, or living in a dangerous neighborhood. Maybe they have witnessed a violent act or two, or has been abused. If their lives are filled with traumatic experiences, they will exhibit fear, depression, anger, aggression, or self-destructive behaviors because they don't feel worthy. Children who act out often aren't embraced with the right support. Rather, those who are the children that wind up in our criminal justice system. It's not only unfair, it's downright cruel. We can pay now for the quality education, or we can pay on the back end with the lost opportunity in incarceration. We already lobbied to raise the age for juvenile prosecution from 7 to 12. Now let's fix it on the front end and make sure that the kids' needs are being met. Social, emotional learning has to take place. Increase the funding will allow schools to provide social and emotional learning support, training, and curriculum. So we just talked about how some of these kids are coming from different backgrounds, and obviously when you have a school based in a poverty part town, I mean, it's common for them to see abuse. It's common for them to only maybe have one parent at home. And obviously Lynn, knowing that, they're doing the best they can. They have one social worker at Tracy Elementary School. And Jason hit it earlier, I mean, it's 550 kids. How can one social worker be there for 550 kids? She talks about how there are 4 lunches and sometimes it's 6 kids in the lunch in her office eating lunch with her just so that she can help them get through the day. I mean, that's still 6 kids, 4 lunches, that's only 24 kids. She's not hitting and getting to make that impact on every kid that might need her that day. Say if it's 150 kids that might need somebody, and she's only able to maybe hit 50 or 60. It's not enough, and then let alone, I mean, she's also in the basement. Like, how can you feel secure? And how can you feel good about yourself when the person you're talking to, you have to go all the way in the basement where, I mean, the school also doesn't have air conditioning. So it's just so much that we can help and give by promoting the Promise Act for these students. Other students require special education services in order to access the same curriculum as their non-disabled peers. At Tracy School, 52 students require help from a special education teacher. Due to the overcrowding of the school, students who require more specialized instruction must move to another school within the district, and Lynn is required to pay for the cost of busing the children to and from when it's necessary. Another thing, we talked with the principal today, Principal Griffin, about how the school isn't handicap accessible. So, like I just said, they have to pay for their school not being handicap accessible and sending the school all the way across town, which is obviously not fair to them because they could be using those resources for something else, for maybe another social worker. An additional 26 students are on a 504 plan, which identifies services such as speech, occupational therapy, counseling, or other special accommodations. Students will be better served by resources that provide support through trained clinical staff, reading programs, counseling, psychological services, athletics, physical education, and other student support services or programs. When we walked around the school today, those kids aren't being given what they need to succeed. This is not an option. This must happen. It must happen. The Commonwealth made a promise to close all proficiency gaps. The FBRC report made 5 strong recommendations on how to do it, and the legislator has the ability to see it through by passing the Promise Act.
So as we move towards wrapping it up, so one of the things we heard at the Tracy School and Lynn as a whole, their district, is FBRC is anticipating they could use about $50 million. I think the actual number is $47 million to help fill all those needs. So when I heard it, obviously, like I said, we play football. I kind of took it towards a football thing. And we talked about if you don't make the playoffs one year, some of you guys cover the team. You know, Bill will thoroughly go through what we would need to do to make the playoffs and win the Super Bowl. And let's say he comes up with 5 points. The reality is if we hit 2 points, we probably won't make the playoffs. If we hit 4.5 of those points, it's more than likely we probably won't win the Super Bowl that year. So we got the opportunity to hear these stories, and we're sitting here talking about all of these things, and they talked about progressing. How can we just progress? And I just simply ask, like, is progressing enough? Won't we still fail these students? In football, we just don't win the Super Bowl, and then we try again next year. If a kid doesn't get the amount he needs in 4th grade, he can't just go to 5th grade, because then he does 4th grade again, or she does 4th grade again. So we just talked about how can we get these kids everything they need and not just help them progress, because that won't, really help them from an educational standpoint. And one thing I wanted to definitely say is we're talking about Lynn, but Lynn is a representation of what goes on throughout the state of Massachusetts with the disparities between the different schools. So I just don't want people to think this is just a fixed Lynn school district. This is for all school districts that are struggling and need more resources, support. If Lynn received the funding to help on the social and economic needs for students, there are approximately 1,800 students at Lynn in English Classical High School and only one social worker. So if they had that, imagine how many more kids they'd be able to help out. We also learned that there's also 13 homeless kids. And within there's a group of kids whose families live in shelters. So I guess you can categorize that for whatever you want, or not homeless. And we talked about imagine the impact that it would help them if they had a stable home or somewhere to go to actually advance and learn and be able to study. We talked a lot about Tracy Elementary School and Lynn schools today, but like I said, they're just an example of what's going on. The stark reality is that economically disadvantaged students need special services, social workers, homelessness liaisons, after-school programs, as well as some basic things like books, computers, art, music, PE. The PE teacher at the Tracy School today was there for three times a week, and each kid gets to go to gym once a week. And these
40 minutes.
Yeah, 40 minutes. And these outside areas of classrooms, obviously there's no computers but each class had, I think it was 4 workshop areas with 4 computers. But there was an average of between 26 and 28 kids in each school. So you had 4 computers for kids to do something. We need to invest more if we want to see these kids succeed.
Since we testified on March 22nd, I've been asked several times why Player Coalition and we as members are advocating for the Promise Act. With the Education Promise Act on top of being the only bill that fully implements the 5 recommendations of the Foundation Budget Review Commission, the Promise Act includes straightforward safeguards against inequity. The bill will require all the rates to be introduced at the same pace, meaning that no students are told, yet again, to wait. It corrects current undercounting of poverty by providing districts with the option to manually count their low income and economically disadvantaged students rather than rely on flawed data matching. And it restores true state-local partnership with our most struggling districts.
When you look at the reality of schools like Lynn with a vastly diverse population in an economically struggling neighborhood, it's like a smack in the face. You heard the guy share earlier about the huge number of students with special needs or English language learners. Well, there's a direct connection to that and their potential success. In Lynn Public Schools, looking at 2018 data, 74% of all students have a 4-year graduation rate. Approximately 64% of students with disabilities will graduate, and a little less than half, at 49%, of English language learners will graduate. Only 49%. We must get those percentages higher, and the way to do it is to provide schools with the funding that the FBRC recommends. Otherwise, like Deb said, what's the point of the report? As residents of the Commonwealth and fathers of young children, we are very concerned about the welfare of these kids. The state of Massachusetts has the opportunity to do the right thing and provide the recommended funding to close the education achievement gap for economically disadvantaged students. Our goal today was to see firsthand the personal struggles that our community is experiencing due to the lack of appropriate funding and show members of legislators that they have the power to pass an education funding reform bill that will service all of our students, including and especially those who have been ignored for so long. Players are advocating for the Promise Act because, like Duran said, it's the only bill that implements all 5 of the FBRC recommendations. It's the only bill that will do right. We know there are competing budgetary priorities before legislators. There always are. But as we stated back in March at the hearing, we will only continue to battle for our children. Our question for legislators is, will you?
We'll now open it up for Any questions?
You have had a chance to get a feel for how your support for this has generated any momentum for the process?
So far we got to hear a little bit of the timeline, really between the budget and the policy in the next couple months and then throughout the summer. So it feels like we're helping, people tell us we're helping. And I think the great thing about today is what we saw, you can't unsee. And I think that's what we wanted to do. I think we had some type of ideas of what we would see. And in some instances, I would say it blew past what we expected. I mean, we thought some things would be tough, but it was really tough. But like I said, it was a very bittersweet feeling being at that school because the people in the school were filled with so much energy and love for these kids, that these kids in their mind, I mean, there was no place better than be at that Tracy school, on a Wednesday morning. So like both these guys said, we all walked away with, I think, not just us three, I think everyone that was there with us walked away with like imagine what would happen if they had the amount of resources they needed.
Yeah, I don't think we're able to tell, like quantify how much we help, if we did at all. But I think at the end of the day, it sounds as though there's been progress of the idea of, hey, you have one idea for what needs to happen, you have one idea, the monies may be different, but at the end of the day, we need to come to some agreements so we can get the help, and we can't just continue to stay at a standstill. After we saw these 5 recommendations, we have to do something and implement something. So it seems like there's been progress from that standpoint, and I guess time will tell to see how much of that progress is actually going to do something.